Hello everyone, this is FIDE Master Viktor Neustroyev and welcome to my today's Mastermind. We are going to talk about how to define weaknesses and exploit them in the game. Okay, well, first of all, please let me know whether the sound and the video quality is good. You are able to see the position, right? So I draw something and you probably should see it. Yeah, everything works. So we are waiting for more people to enter our mastermind. And actually, defining weaknesses is a big issue, and there are a lot of people who, even being 2000, don't understand how to create weaknesses and how to define potential weaknesses, how to create them and take advantage of them. Okay, so everything is working. Oh, there are a lot of people from different countries. The United States, Spain, Israel, China, Canada, Germany. Yeah, there will be time for your questions, and you can ask questions anytime you want. I'm going to answer them when I have a small pause. Okay, I'm just checking if the stream started in all platforms. So I'm running it on our website, Chesslands. I'm also running it on the YouTube channel of the Chess World, my own YouTube channel, and my own YouTube channel, Tricks of Chess. Okay, and one more thing that I want you to know before we start our event today. It's this. There is a tournament scheduled for the next weekend. It starts in 7 days. So it's not 7 days, 1 hour. It starts the same time. It's April the 2nd, which is Sunday actually. Sunday, April the 2nd, and at 11 a.m. Eastern Standard Time. It will be a blitz game. It will be a blitz tournament with 9 rounds, 3+2, and it will be conducted on chess.com. So you can register here. And as usual, we offer money prizes. $50, $40, $25, and of course 1 hour class with a FIDE master. Also, 2 more prizes for the fourth and the fifth prizes. It's also 1 hour lesson with FIDE master. Either FIDE master, it's either FIDE master Nikolai Yordanov, this guy, or FIDE master Armin Musovic. You can also choose instead candidate master Snehal Bosail. He is strong enough. He actually has 1 international master norm. So you can choose between these 3 coaches if you are among our winners. So I'll send you the link. Don't forget to register if you are going to participate in this event. Okay, just a sec. The link will be sent for you in the chat. Click on it, and when you have time, please register. Okay, just one more thing before we start. Okay, let's start now. Please look at this position. It's taken from the game that of two Soviet players that you probably don't know, Timoshenko and Chernov. Well, let's identify the weaknesses. Well, here I want you to decide which squares and which pawns are weak. And I'm checking your answers. There will be 9 rounds in the tournament. Yes, I see all the comments. So, okay, so the link to the tournament will be sent again later. Let's now focus on the weaknesses. So in this position, I want you to identify the weak pawns and the weak squares. I just want you to give a try, and then I will explain everything. Okay, so Paul suggests h6, d6 and c7. Okay. Well, d6, d4. The king is a weakness. Well, the king is a weakness. Well, you cannot say actually like that, but I understand what you mean. So the king is weak. It's not a weakness, but the king is weak, which means that you can potentially attack the king and maybe succeed with it, or transform your advantage, or transform your king side attack into another kind of advantage. Maybe you'll gain the material during this attack. Okay, so all of you here say that the d4 pawn is a weakness, and this is where I definitely agree with you. Let's learn, well, if speaking about pawns, then these two other pawns are weaknesses. However, when we define the weaknesses, we should also have in mind how our pieces are located. That's why c2, being located on the semi-open file, is only a potential weakness. But because of the bishop being well placed on d3, it's not. It can be hardly attacked because the bishop is still there and is unlikely to move. b2 is probably a weakness that can be potentially attacked, but not at the moment. And well, if the queen was, let's say, on b6 somehow, then probably yes, that would be a weakness. And if you push it forward, you create a weakness on c3. Well, c7 isn't a weakness because the knight is able to control this square. They are also about to play rook c8 move. d6, yes, but how do you take advantage of this move? So if you want to bring your bishop there, it's fine. But what does your bishop do? It doesn't. You cannot benefit of the position of the bishop on d6. So first thing that you should learn is that whether a pawn or a square is weak depends on the current location of your pieces. d4 will be a weakness anyway, even with no pieces at all. There is one more thing that we can say is a weakness as well, but the thing that who Adictualia mentioned, it was about the king. Well, the king is not a weakness, but the king is weak, and having in mind that these two pieces can be combined, well, their activity can be combined together, and the queen can potentially get to h7, we may say that the enemy king is also the object of the attack. That means that white should attack the weakness on d4 and combine it with the idea of the kingside attack. Usually, having two weaknesses or one weakness and the second target of the attack on the other flank is enough to win the game. Okay, so we definitely understand that d4 is a weakness, but which move should we play? Queen e4 doesn't work, it's just knight f6. The queen is protecting here, the queen has to go back to e2, and the h7 is protected. So definitely not queen e4. Which move would you suggest? Okay, how long the class will be? The class will be just 1 hour or maybe 1 hour 15 minutes. If speaking about the d6 square, while you are thinking about the next move of while you are thinking about the move that white should play, I want to say something about knight d6. Well, yes, this is a good idea to place the knight on d6, but it would be much better if this knight would be supported with the pawn on c5 or e5. Because even if your knight gets there and you attack several squares into the enemy camp, the position of the knight on d6 is unstable, because they can always take on f4 and then just play rook fd8 and you have to retreat with your knight. So that doesn't make much sense. If the knight was better protected, then yes. Moving the knight to d6 could make sense. However, the knight does a more important function. It attacks d4. Okay. I see your suggestions. Okay, and bishop e5. So this move is correct. Bishop e5. The move was suggested by Rushikesh Patil. I'm sorry if I'm not pronouncing your name properly. But well, I try to read according to English standards. Okay, so and you're attacking here. They cannot play knight f6, and they are most likely have to take, after which you take with your rook. And then d4 becomes a weakness. In order to protect this weakness, black played knight e7, which is a mistake, after which the game is won in a few moves. How would you proceed in this position for white in order to win the game? Okay, so I'm checking your comments. Oh, Queen e4 in which position? Queen e4 right now? Well, probably yes. Queen e4 should be done in this position. Okay, just one more thing. Yeah, Queen e4, d4 is attacked. Right, so you see, if a6 is played, it's knight takes d4 immediately, after which knight e6 and Queen e4 also. Well, knight e7 was played, the game continued with this move. Playing knight g6 was the best option, however, this move wasn't played in the game. The queen from e4 was attacking d4 and was threatening with a mate. Well, now, of course, you cannot take on d4 with the queen. You can probably take on d4 with your knight, it's fine, but then f5 and you sacrifice the exchange for 2 pawns. However, it's still a better position. But instead of doing it, you can just take on e6. And if queen takes e6, you exchange the queens and take on g6, getting 2 minor pieces for a rook. And if pawn takes, you take with the queen. It seems that you still have 2 minor pieces, but this time after e6, the knight is trapped. However, queen h7, king f7, rook e1, they take it. Then just h3, and this position is winning because you attack here, they cannot really defend it. Also, you can do this maneuver. So, well, here white's attack is strong enough, and it's not a big problem for a grandmaster to win this game, especially having in mind how weak all these pawns are now, including the g7 one. Okay, so in the game it was played rook f to d8, queen h7, king f8 checks, knight goes there, rook a to e1, and if you play something like a6, you won't, no, black doesn't benefit of this move because of bishop h7, and after this king goes there, it's just rook e6 and queen g7 then, what leads to a checkmate. So after queen h8, knight g8, and rook a to e1, in the game it was bishop d5 played. But bishop d5 is also a mistake. Well, I mean, it's not a mistake, this move just doesn't save the game. Rook takes, queen takes, knight c7, which is not required, bishop h7 can be played right away, and bishop h7 was played now, after which black resigned. Well, you may say knight e7 is a wrong move, and I partially agree with you. The best option was knight to f6. But even if this move is played, the pawn is still lost. Can you please tell me how white gains the pawn on d4 this time? Well, in that position, when we had the attack, we need h3 because it's just a prophylaxis. We don't really need this move. It's just a prophylaxis to not blunder the back rank mate in some of our combinations. So now the task is how to take this pawn when the knight is on f6 and queen e4 no longer works. Queen f4. Okay, queen f4, rook d8, rook f d8, for example. So Funky Sharky suggests queen f4. Then I say this move. And how to play then? Bishop e4, but what's the point of bishop e4? Yes, actually, it's rook d1. Queen f4, rook f d8 to not blunder on a7. That's why this rook, the f rook, goes to d8. Rook d1, and you are threatening to take and then play bishop h7 to gain the queen. So let's say they move the king, but then you just play bishop f1 and nobody can save the pawn on d4. So rook c8, for example, then you take there. If a6 is played, you take there with the knight and they cannot exploit this pin. Moreover, you can protect your knight with the c3 pawn. So here, by identifying the main weakness, which is d4, and it's actually easy to realize it, you are trying to find how exactly to capture this pawn. And that's why such move like bishop e5 may come to your mind, because this is how you provoke your opponent to exchange the knight for the bishop, which in his opinion is beneficial. But even if he doesn't do this, then queen g3 looks good and queen e4 is fine, because after queen e4 there will be no knight f6 move anymore. So with bishop e5 you get rid of one of his defenders and then make this pawn weaker and easier to attack with queen a4 move. Or queen f4 move, depends on how they play. So that's why if you identify properly, it's easier for you to come up with a plan and find the moves that allow you to exploit the weakness. Well, this is where we are talking about pawns as weaknesses. We are going to talk about weak squares a little bit later, just on the next example. About the weak square. So we have the same position, but the knight is there. Could you please answer the question whether the c5 square is weak or not? There is an algorithm to identify the weaknesses. I'm going to suggest it on the next, I'm going to say it after we analyze these two positions. It is weak. Okay, how did you decide that this square is weak? It's actually black to move. So, okay, in this position, the c5 isn't weak. Why? Because they can just simply play such move like b6. But if we look at this position, for example, where the pawns are already advanced, then c5 is a weakness, and white is threatening with knight c5, attacking several targets into the enemy camp. Well, you may say, okay, they cannot play with the pawn, why not to play maybe something like that to cover this? Yes, it's possible, but this time the queen is tied down to the c5. So look, white uses their knight to potentially attack the weaknesses and wants to jump to c5 to occupy this square. And black has to keep his queen defending this square. If, let's say, it was the knight on d7, I would say it's fine. Then with rook c8, this square won't be so weak. But with the queen defending and being only controlling this square for at least 5-6 more moves, well, I mean, controlling this square with the queen is a lot. I mean, the queen's task is to perform something else, secure weaknesses on the other flank, and maybe participate on the king's side, but not to cover only one square of the position. Okay, so when the pawn is advanced, this square is weak. And there is an algorithm how to define weak pawns and weak squares. So, for example, a weak pawn or a weak square is a pawn and the square that can be easily attacked or occupied and is hardly and can be hardly defended. Like this pawn. It's easy to attack by bringing more pieces, like queen e4, bishop e5, maybe rook e4, and knight from b3 or knight from b5, where it was. But it's hard to defend it. It may be defended only with this knight, with one rook from behind, and probably with the queen from a certain spot. But these are only 3 defenders, while white at least brings 4 attackers. That's why d4 is weak. So the c5 can be hardly defended because of the queen on e7. And if you use your queen to defend a certain square, it's definitely something wrong with your position. In this position, c5 is not a weakness because the pawn on b6 is enough to secure it. So the pawn stops the knight, it's fine. Only the d4 is a weakness. Well, and how to identify the weaknesses? You can first search for the pawns which are isolated. And probably you know that more pawn islands means more weaknesses into the position. Well, another weakness can be the g7 if you are able to keep your pieces attacking it, which is almost impossible in this position. Let's say if the rook was on g3, then yes, we can say g7 is potentially a weakness, can be attacked with these moves, maybe queen g4 in some certain conditions. But no, it's not. And if we go back to our original position, here d4 is a weakness, d6 square is a weak square, but we cannot occupy it. Maybe it's potentially weakness, but not immediately. In our position, these 2 pawns are potential weaknesses, but having the bishop on d3 means that it's not a weakness at the moment, and it can be only in case if the bishops are exchanged and the enemy rook is placed on the c file. Okay, let's continue with the next example. Maybe it will be more clear for you. So, seems to be quite similar to the previous scenario, but this is a different game. It was white to move. And, well, I'm not asking you to identify a weakness. It's obvious that this is a pawn on d4. What would you do as white in order to take advantage of this weakness? Okay, I'm trying to answer the question. So can we say that a square or a pawn which is not protected by any other pawn is a weakness? We can say so if only we see that the enemy piece is about to take or occupy this square. If, for example, we cannot protect this certain square or this certain pawn, but your opponent cannot attack it, then it's not a weakness. The weakness is defined according to the pieces that remain on the board and the pieces location, of course. So if, for example, okay, let's go back to the previous example. Here, let's say this knight is not on b3. It's, let's say, somewhere here. But if you see that knight c1, knight b3 can be played, and black has no counterplay, then c5 is a weakness, because when the knight goes there, he can get the control over the c5. So the weaknesses depend on the position of, or first on the number and the quality of pieces that are located on the board, and second, of their location. Now this example. So what do you suggest in this position? So rook e1 looks strong, occupying the e file. Okay. Now there is also one more weakness here. Bishop f5. Bishop f5, exchanging the bishop. Well, I didn't think about this move, to be honest, but I'm not sure whether it works or not. No, well, I don't know. Let's check bishop f5 in this position. Bishop f5, bishop f5, rook f5. Then maybe queen c6. Yeah, then queen d6, and knight d4 this time cannot be played, because if knight d4 it's queen c2, and there is a pin. Well, you can play h3, of course, but they take on c2. c2 is hanging. c2 is a weakness. While the bishop is exchanged, the d4 weakness is compensated with the weakness on c2. So bishop f5 doesn't work. f3 is also suggested. Well, knight d4 right now is a blunder, of course. The rook is hanging. You cannot play like that. Okay. So I'm checking your other comments. Queen c6. Okay, fine. f3. f3 is another suggestion. Yes, I agree about f3 move. Then the bishop moves, and in this position you cannot take on d4, right? Because queen d4 is a check, the queens are exchanged, and after rook takes d4, you can still do bishop h7 check and gain this rook, but if you calculate this line to the very end, you realize that actually it's not a win of the exchange. With this operation, you exchange your rook for two minor pieces and the pawn. You exchange two minor pieces for rook and the pawn. That doesn't favor you. So knight d4 cannot be played right now, but after f3 bishop e6, you can actually continue with this simple move, and now they don't have any defenders. You are about to play with rook d4 and then exchange the rooks, and then maybe retreat to c3 to cover the weakness on c2. Rook ac8, rook d4. Then c3 can be done as well. So that was the simplest way of taking advantage of this move. However, in the game, it was rook d to e1 played. Black played this move, white continued with this move, they repeated the position, and then they played 134 moves, and the game ended in a draw, if I'm not mistaken. But Well, definitely every time after bishop g4 is played, f3 was an option. Rook d e1 for the first time makes sense, because black may consider such move like a6, trying to trap the knight. But if a6 is played, then you can actually take advantage of another weakness that was formed after rook d to e1 was played. Which weakness I'm talking about? Which move would you suggest for white to play? Yeah, it's also the game played by two Soviet grandmasters. So the seventh rank, these two squares are weak. A rook is 7. And if the queen moves, then you can either do this or play knight c7. Depends on where. Well, actually, you can take on d4. They probably react with this move, and then you take on d4. If they react with this move, then knight c7 works. But after rook e7, they can play this sneaky move. And capturing the queen doesn't lead to a checkmate, but is a mistake. After bishop e2, threatening the mate, h3, rook takes f1, king escapes, it's just knight d7. And black has too much material for the queen. So black is winning in this position. But in order to weaken the d4, you can play this move. Rook takes rook, then the d4 is no longer protected. So if knight takes, you can take on d4 with your knight. If rook takes, you can still take on d4, but this time queen e1 check, bishop f1, and after queen e3, for example, you successfully exchange the queens and pass the game into a minor piece endgame with extra pawn, which should be winning. So for the first time, it makes sense to play rook e1, but after the bishop retreats, you play rook d1, bishop g4, then definitely f3 should be done with the idea of bishop f1 and taking on d4. Okay, so d4 was a weakness, and with this f3 move, we could take advantage of it by just directly attacking, because there are just a few pieces protecting it, queen and rook, while we can attack with 3. Okay, the next example, which I'm sure you'll find more interesting. Well, can you please identify weak pawns or potentially weak pawns in this position? It's black to move, if it's important. Yeah, it is important, actually. It's black to move. Well, I want you to identify the weaknesses and also suggest the move for black. So c3 is a weakness. Okay, I agree with you. Okay, what else? What maybe you can find another weakness? Okay, so funky sharky is correct, and of course some calculation is required. So the weakness is on c3. b2 is potentially weak in case if the c pawn is removed, maybe this. But if you play something like that, the next move of white is c4. Then they move the rook, play b3, and you cannot benefit. There is only one weak square, it's c3. But after white castles, and your bishop jumps to c3, you don't really improve your position. Queen just moves and that's it. So they are about to play c4. That's why we have no time to play a waiting move, but we have to play c4 ourselves and calculate this line. This is what was played in the game. Well, this time that were not Soviet players playing it. I don't know these guys, but doesn't matter. They played in Hungary, but I don't know this. Well, probably they are from they were from Eastern Europe. So c4, and if they take on c4, then we have queen c7, we have rook c8. We can take on c3 and then play queen to c7. Well, we'd better start with queen c7 right away, with the idea of moving our knight to c5 with a temper. Let's say bishop goes to a2, take, and after b takes c3, it's just knight d5, threatening with bishop takes c3. And our bishop is protected, which is quite important. For example, if instead we decide to take and continue with rook c8, and they play bishop to b3, after knight d5, we don't win because of this move, and bishop c3 is faced with bishop b7, and in this position white has three minor pieces. Well, the a6 pawn dies, so it's three minor pieces versus queen, which almost compensates the queen. That's why queen c7 is more important. So queen c7, bishop a2, then we take on c3, and if they take with the queen, we exchange the queens, and the pawn on c3 is a weakness. Here we just simply continue with this move, and then we are pressuring two pawns, a4 and a4. If they instead move the bishop to e2, the pawn here becomes the object of the attack, and knight c5. And after queen c2, we just take and take advantage of the weakness on c3. So they take with the knight, we take with the other knight, they take with the queen, and lose the rook after bishop takes c3. So taking on c4 isn't a good idea. That's why instead they retreated. Bishop to c2, b3. Now bishop b1 traps the rook almost for the entire game. Bishop d1 was played instead. The problem of this move is that now the e4 pawn becomes a weakness. Why? The bishop is no longer protecting it, and we can attack it with the second knight. Another weak square into the enemy camp is d3. After the bishop left its diagonal, you can get your knight to c3 and jump with the knight, forcing him to lose his castling privilege. So white has a tough choice whether to protect on e4 or to castle. And they decide, well, if they play this move, for example, it's just knight d3. King goes there, and after knight g4, they cannot save the pawn on f2. Even if they play this move, well, they can only do this move. If they take with the queen, it's the other pawn hanging, so pawn takes, and then you can play e6. And even if they play on bishop b3, trying to undermine your knight's position, here you just take on d5, gain another pawn, and then attack through the e file, the weak pawn on e3. So let's go back. Knight c5 was played, bishop f6. They wanted to get rid of our knight attacking on e4. So white understands that with this, that they cannot save the pawn. For example, queen e3, knight d3, knight b2. There is no other piece that can protect it. Pushing the pawn forward means to sacrifice on d5. So that's why they liquidate our attacker. Which move would you suggest? Would you take with the bishop or would you take with the pawn? What comes to your mind? So with the pawn, okay, Paul, can you explain your idea? Why do you want to capture with the pawn? John suggests to open the E file. Rushikesh suggests taking with the bishop. Knight d3 as an intermediate move. Well, interesting idea of knight d3, but don't forget that your knight can be undermined with bishop b3. Well, taking with the pawn to bring the rook and attack there. That's right. That's right. However, another idea of this move is to play f5 and undermine this pawn to make the d5 pawn weaker. However, f5 right now is cannot be played at the moment. Well, bishop f6 was still fine. Then your position is slightly better. So if they take on c4, it's knight e4. And then there is a pawn on d5 hanging. So taking with the bishop, with the pawn was the best idea. They played this move. Why do they play this move? Well, they could castle actually, and that would be a better move. But then h5 and maybe rook e8, or maybe rook e8 first. And if they play this move, well, I'm not sure if you can do this. Well, then maybe rook c8 first, and then you can consider this option. And after that, maybe also king h7 and bishop h6 to trap the queen. Okay, that was probably the best move. Instead, in the game, it was bishop e2. They were trying to attack our weakness. However, when the king is on e1, it's the e4 pawn is more important. So they blocked. We took the weakness on e4, they took our pawn on c4. The material is equal, but the white's position is completely lost. What do you think black should play in this position? Who can tell me? So queen e7 are suggested by almost everyone. Queen e5 suggested by John. Well, queen e5 may be too slow. However, I still understand what you want to do. In the game, it was played queen e8 instead, attacking on e4 also. So bishop d5 is a threat, and rook a4 is another move that can allow you to gain a pawn. In the game, it was this, after which f5 was played, and this is how black prevents white from castling. If castling, it's bishop d4 and rook a2. Knight c6. Bishop h6. If the queen gets distracted, it's rook e2 with a decisive attack. Queen d1. Well, which move to play? This time, when white cannot castle, there is no need to hurry. No rush, so a5 with the idea of bishop a6. And here, white just decided to play king f1 to get rid of the pin. What would you play then? Rook takes e2, and then what? And then bishop a6. Well, yes, actually, rook takes e2, queen takes e2, and bishop a6. You don't win a queen, but after the exchange, you are collecting these weaknesses. King d1. Well, not king f3 because bishop d5 would be a check. However, you cannot take on d5 right now because of knight e7 fork. So king f8 first, knight d4 was played, and then bishop d5. This is where we can stop. There is a bishop and two pawns to compensate the rook. Also, this bishop pair is quite strong, and well, white is completely losing here. There is nothing they can do to survive. This pawn is a weakness. This is a weakness as well. The king is the object of the attack. The g2 is under attack. So because of a huge number of pawns, extra pawns, and pieces activity, especially bishop's activity, black wins here. Well, they played for 11 moves more, and only then white resigned. What I want you to remember from this game. So there was a weakness on e4. Okay, let's start from the very beginning. So first of all, there is a weakness on c3 and potentially on b2. That's why we play the move to fix the weakness, and it makes easier for us to attack. Bishop c2, b3, bishop d1, and after knight c5, there is another weakness on e4. And as well as on d3, which is this time much weaker than the pawn on c3 was. And then we are converting our advantage. So there was a weakness on e4 that we converted into initiative, into pieces activity through the e file. That shouldn't be a big issue. Well, it shouldn't be something that you'd better avoid. When you see that there is a weakness, you should exploit it. If there is a weak pawn, it doesn't obligatory mean you should capture this pawn by all means. It means that you should try to take advantage of this pawn being a weakness or this square being weak. Either trying to tie the enemy pieces down to the protection of it, or maybe you by liquidating this pawn create something else like black did. Black did the attack through the e file after they took on e4, or maybe you just exchange this pawn and make the pawn on d5 a weakness. This is what is illustrated in the next example, where black also took on f6. And by the first glance, this move seems to be weird. They just created an isolated pawn on d6, then this bishop is blocked. But the main idea of this move was not only to attack e4, which can be easily saved. For example, rook e8, queen c2. The idea was instead to play f5 and take the control over the weak squares into the enemy camp. They cannot tolerate this move, so they cannot defend it. For example, if they continue with this move, they would be in trouble. After f takes e4, knight takes e4, knight takes e4, queen takes e4, bishop f5, they are in trouble. So that's why after f5, let's say they take, sorry, this move doesn't work, it's just a blunder. E takes f5, bishop f5, and then what? The rook can hardly find a good spot, but even if it did find, then all these squares are weak, and the bishop's activity, maybe together with the rook, decide the result of the game. For example, rook c1, you can play this move and either gain the exchange or at least gain the pawn on a3. b4 was played in the game, however, after knight e4, it's extra pawn, and there is also a weak square that you can occupy. This time it makes sense, because the knight attacks a lot of squares into the enemy camp, as well as the bishop, and after a4, black gains more space and fixes the pawn on a3 that later in the endgame can be captured with this simple maneuver. Queen c4, bishop d7, threatening with bishop b5, and later that happened. So, for example, rook c8 was played, which is not obligatory. Well, if this time they take on d6, it's just knight e2, rook e2, and bishop b5, gaining the exchange. Bishop d3 was played, queen f6, knight c4, and then bishop b5, so they still experience huge problems with this pin, and well, they cannot do anything. For example, I don't know, maybe this move will help. Well, if this move is played, it's just knight d5, and the position is still losing. Okay, now let's continue with the next example. This is the game taken from this is the fragment taken from the game between Anatoly Karpov and Joel Latier. Here I want you to identify weaknesses into the enemy camp. You're playing with white pieces. Suggest a move which starts a plan that allows you to take advantage of these weaknesses. So now we are mainly focused on how to take advantage of the weaknesses. Oh, okay, I see your question. There is c4. Okay, sorry, but let me quickly check. Where is c4? There is no c4 move. No c4. Oh, yeah. Okay, let's continue with Karpov. Okay, while you're thinking, let me quickly remind you that we are going to conduct a tournament next weekend. It starts the same time as our mastermind started today at 11 a.m. It's Sunday, April the 2nd. And there are 3 money prizes, and all 5 winners as an extra prize get a 1-hour class with a FIDE master from our school. It's either FIDE master Nikolai Yordanov or Armin Musovich, or candidate master Snihal Bosail. Well, however, if you want to book a class with one of these coaches, you can simply click, well, you can book a test lesson, which is a trial 20-minute session. Then you choose your time zone. I'm in Asia, Almaty. Where is it? Asia, Almaty. So I'm here, but usually the time zone is set automatically. Then you choose the time that works for you, enter your name, and click to proceed to the payment. It's absolutely free, but we freeze $2 on your bank account, on your card that you're going to pay with. And in a few days, we just release this money. This important feature is made to just to make sure that you are serious about the chess lesson and you won't miss it. If you're looking for a 1-hour class, a paid session, then you can also book it on this website. You just click book your lesson and choose what works for you according to your time zone, and then proceed to the payment again. I'm going to send you the link so you can book a class, and if you want, of course. And we continue. We continue with our topic, which is exploiting weaknesses. So first we were trying to identify weaknesses, now we are trying to exploit them. So here your task is to create a permanent weakness into the enemy camp and then exploit it. So this is also the link for the tournament. You can register there if you're going to participate at next Sunday. Okay, so now I'm going to check your comments. B7 is potentially a weakness. That's right. This is what you can take. This is what you can analyze and take advantage of. So to create these weaknesses, well, yes, C6 can be a weakness if you do this, which you should have in mind, of course. But here, Karpov starts a minority attack, which is quite common for the positions from Queen's Gambit. Well, there were other suggestions. Some, well, I don't remember who exactly, but okay, it was on Twitch. Forky said that H7 is weakness. Okay, yes, you may say like that, but how do you take advantage of these weaknesses? Of this weakness on H7. There are two knights covering it. Well, you may say you can get rid of one of them, but what about the other one? Moreover, your queen and bishop are located in such a way, so bishop h7 makes no sense. King h8, and you wouldn't benefit of this operation. That's why h7 isn't a weakness. You cannot take advantage of it. If, for example, you had enough time to remaneuver these pieces and also to distract both knights, then probably yes, but not in our case. So that's why here Karpov tries to create a weakness on b7 or c6. Knight g6 was played, and he continues with a4. This time he threatens with this, which makes the pawn on c6 a weakness. That's why black continues with a6 move. Bishop c3, queen goes to g5. Could you please suggest the next move of white? Well, bishop c3 to aim for the knight. I don't think the knight is what we should take. If we take the queen takes, plain f4 makes sense, but not right now. You see, there is bishop e3 always with a check. That is quite annoying, but generally speaking, f4 can be a threat. And in order to play that, bishop g6. Well, bishop g6, I think your bishop is quite important for this position. Moreover, without such a bishop, it's difficult to attack the enemy pawns located on the light squares. b5 should be done, but before doing b5, it's bishop d4. Exchanging of this bishop is important, because that makes the b file clear and these pawns more vulnerable. Bishop takes d4. Knight takes d4, and this time f4, f5 can be a threat. Just make sure you don't blunder this knight. So right now it's not a threat, but can be potentially a threat in future. Bishop d5 was played. e4. The knight is chased away, and this knight retreats to f3, attacking the queen. So white regrouped their pieces, attack the queen, and after queen f4, while c5 is no longer possible, white plays b5. And with this operation, white wants, well, of course, a takes b5, a takes b5, it's clear, because that pawn was hanging. And this is what white wants. They want to capture on c6 and make the c6 a weakness that can be easily attacked. Or they want black to take, after which the b7 pawn becomes alone and can be attacked through a7. Black continues with knight e5. Knight takes e5, queen takes e5, b takes c6, b takes c6, and rook ac1. Well, you see, you cannot take with the queen at the moment. You just blunder rook d3. Rook ac1, this pawn is a weakness. Rook d6, they're trying to defend it. Queen c3, the queens are exchanged, and if queen takes on c3 immediately, another idea that white has is to take the control over the weak square, which is e5, which will chase the rook away and make this pawn weaker. Knight d7, bishop e2, rook d1, bishop takes d1, and now the c6 is hanging, so they decide to exchange the queens and protect the c6 pawn from behind with their rook. That was a good idea because it's difficult to suggest anything else. After which f4, threatening with f5. f6 is played. Now we need more attackers. Well, if it was possible, here white would better immobilize this pawn. But right now there is no such an option, and c5 can be played. This is what you should assume. And after knight e2, knight d4, white provoked black to play this move. However, it doesn't mean that the knight cannot jump to d4. It can because of this pin, and the bishop is under attack. So bishop goes there. Then Karpov continues with this move. So the knight is pinned. Rook goes to e8, attacking there. This time bishop d7 doesn't work because of c takes d4, the rook is hanging. That's why knight b5. And this move means the knight is not protected. Knight b6. If rook c5, we lose on e4. That's why knight d6 first, to protect it. And if they play this move, we just exchange and take on c5, gaining the pawn and winning this in game. That's why knight a4 instead. Rook a3. Both pieces are under attack, so rook a8. And what do you think is the next move of white in this position? Okay, so I'm looking at your suggestions. Bishop d1. Well, bishop d1, just knight b6. Knight f7, knight f7, I don't see the point. e5. Well, this position of the bishop is better than the bishop on f7, and the bishop on f7 can be also the object of the attack. e6 can be played on the next move, then e7, e8, so bishop d5, and after e6 Latier resigned because of e7 coming. Well, let me illustrate why exactly he resigned. Then e7 and knight d6 or knight g7. So what I want you to remember, how to exploit weaknesses. So here white focused on the attack of the weakness of the c6 pawn. First of all, white initiated a pawn minority attack, created a weakness on c6, and tried to attack it with their pieces. Later, when the pawn moved to c5, instead of trying to attack it with something else, with maybe exchanging the bishop for a knight and trying to attack it with the bishop from d3, let's say, white decided to focus on his other plan. So he converted the advantage of having the weaknesses into the enemy, having the weakness into the enemy camp. He converted it to a passed pawn on the e file, because of which he could win the game. And in order to defend this weak pawn on c5, black has to tie his pieces. He has to move all his pieces from the center to the flank. That's why e5, e6 maneuver became possible. And from that moment, I want you to learn that when you created a weakness, permanent weakness into the enemy camp, and you wanna gain it, it's not always obligatory to capture that pawn. You can take advantage of this pawn being into the enemy camp in a different way. For example, tie enemy pieces down to the protection of this pawn. You can distract his pieces. You can force his pieces to get to one flank while you do something on the other flank. It's not always important to capture this pawn. And moreover, strong chess players, especially grandmasters, do not capture this pawn. If they see they can capture the pawn, but they understand they can capture this pawn anytime later, they'd better play some prophylactic moves in order to not fall into complications, and take this pawn later in the game when the position is safe enough and there will be no counterplay for their opponent. Okay, so is it clear? There was a question actually, what our lessons are about and what is typically done at the class with the coach. Well, during the first session, the coach usually tries to analyze your games, and then all our coaches have a certain training plan that they should follow according to our standards. This training plan was developed by me and some other coaches of our school, and they have to stick to it. But it doesn't mean that, if you, for example, struggle with a certain opening and misunderstand the position that you play, it doesn't mean that instead they will force you to solve some exercises that I prepared according to the training program. No, they will focus on what exactly you need at the moment to become better. So usually at the first class, they analyze your typical mistakes and try to explain you what are they, what you should work on, and then they suggest how to work on it. So something like that. So I'm sure that everyone who takes a class won't regret of it. Well, if you're not sure if you are ready to pay, let's say $30 for a class with a FIDE master, you can book a trial class. It's it's a shorter class. It's only 20 minute session, but you can choose, for example, Boryl Zlatanovich. He is actually quite a famous coach. Well, choose a class with him and demonstrate him some of your games and ask what you should work on, and he will definitely provide you with suggestions. But if you are going to work with a coach on a regular basis, and let's say you then decide to book a 1 hour class, let's say with the same coach, Boryl Zlatanovich, and then you work with him on a regular basis, he will definitely follow a certain plan that he creates, and he will provide you with the exercises that you should complete. He will tell you which exact puzzles you need, which openings where you can take all the information. Some of the material will be covered during the class, some will be provided as a homework, and so on. So it's a complex lesson, so I kindly recommend anyone to take it. You won't regret it. Okay, now your questions. Do you have any questions? Well, today our mastermind was actually quite short. It was 1 hour and 10 minutes. And I just explained some basics of how to identify weaknesses. Maybe it makes sense to create a 4-hour masterclass that we usually conduct on Saturday and Sunday morning if you live in the United States, or afternoon if you live in Europe. Uh, oh, well, this event happens in Zoom, and the next hour class is scheduled on the middle. The next masterclass is scheduled in the middle of April, or the 15th and the 16th of April. That masterclass will be devoted to visualization and will be conducted by our coach, international master David Fitzsimons, this guy. You can also book a class with him. He is also a very good coach, and his English is perfect. He is originally from Ireland. Okay, let me check your questions again. Yes, you can ask a general strategy question. All questions are welcome. Well, thank you, Clovis. But, well, not me. Anatoly Karpov should thank you. And yes, he was, and maybe he is still, a high quality chess player. Okay, so I'm waiting for a general strategy question. And if you are watching this mastermind at our website, Chesslands, there is a button below the video which is called "Click here to sign up for your lesson." And if you click on it, you can sign up your lesson with International Master David Fitzsimons or anybody else. Okay, so what is your general strategy question? One more thing, guys. If you like these events, could you please share it with your friends, chess players, so more people come and join our events. Well, especially such event like this, because it's absolutely free. And if you know, we have a group on chess.com. Let me show you. Okay, this is my profile, and this is Twitch. I'm streaming on Twitch. That's why it shows in my profile. Well, here, if you click Chesslands, there is a club there is a club that we manage on chess.com. Well, there is a tournament scheduled. This is the tournament that I was talking about, and also our administrator always publish some interesting topics, some videos. So, for example, okay, this is a puzzle, and he also created an article devoted to Niger of Sicilian. So there is a lot of helpful information, and you can enter it. And you definitely need to enter it if you're going to play in our Blitz tournament. Okay. Okay, let me read the general question. So there is a known system for evaluating positions, material, pieces, pawn structure, but there is also Jeremy Silman's way of finding imbalances. What is your opinion on Silman's system? Well, to be honest, I'm not familiar with his system. I should probably check it out. But I'm familiar. Well, I'm the one who supports the classical way of evaluating the position. when you compare the king's positions, your piece's activity, pawn structure, and so on. And actually, I created a course devoted uh, to evaluation. It's called Evaluate Before You Calculate. A step-by-step guide. Well, it's on Chessable. However, well, this is where I explain the classical concept, how to evaluate and how evaluation of the position affects your candidate moves and how to choose these candidate moves. So you can find it here on Chessable. Well, just search on Chessable, evaluate before you calculate, or I can send you the link if you want. Or you can just search it on Chessable if you are into it. Okay. So thank you for attending our class. And hope to see you next Sunday. Next Sunday probably there will be next Sunday there will be a tournament, and the Sunday after there will be another mastermind or a webinar by me. Hope to see you then, and thank you for coming. Don't forget to register in the tournament. Good luck, and I was glad that so many people